I woke up expecting to see autumn rain against my window. Instead, I saw 2 feet of snow. I looked at the digital clock and felt my blood run cold. It wasn't October, it was February 14th. I had lost 3 entire months of my life. My son told everyone I was resting. He told everyone I was safe. But when I dragged myself to the medicine cabinet and found the hidden bottle of pills behind the Band-Aids, I realized the truth. They weren't sleeping pills. They were xylazine, a veterinary sedative used to tranquilize horses for surgery. My son hadn't just been caring for me, he had been keeping me as a pet while he sold my life for parts. My name is Elaine Porter. I am 66 years old, and as I sat there shivering in a cold sweat, realizing I had somehow lost 3 entire months of my life, I knew with a terrifying certainty that I hadn't just been asleep. I had been erased. I dragged myself into the bathroom, using the wall for support, my legs trembling with an exhaustion that didn't make sense after a full night's sleep. I splashed cold water on my face and looked in the mirror. I gasped. The woman staring back at me was a ghost. My cheekbones jutted out sharply. I must have lost 20 pounds or more. My skin was paper thin and gray, the result of 3 months without sunlight or proper nutrition. I wasn't just tired, I was withered. They hadn't just been sedating me, they had been starving me by slow degrees. There was a slight misalignment in the medicine cabinet. The mirror door wasn't fully flush with the frame. I opened it. At first glance, it was just my blood pressure medication and vitamins. But my hand, shaking slightly, reached toward the back, behind the old box of Band-Aids. My fingers brushed against plastic. I pulled them out. 3 amber prescription bottles. The labels had been aggressively torn off, leaving only sticky white residue and jagged paper edges. But on one bottle, a small corner of the label remained. In looping, confident handwriting that I recognized instantly, someone had written, "Take 2 at bedtime." I opened the bottle. Inside were large, oblong blue pills. They didn't look like anything my doctor had ever prescribed. I hurried back to my bedroom and dug my phone out from under the mattress, a hiding spot I had started using instinctively weeks ago, though I couldn't remember why. I typed the imprint code from the blue pill into the search bar, Pleva 434. The results loaded and my breath hitched in my throat. Acepromazine. I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a sleeping pill. It wasn't for anxiety. It was a veterinary sedative used to restrain horses and large livestock before surgery. I checked the second bottle, xylazine, another animal tranquilizer. I sat on the edge of the bed, the bottles clutched in my hand as the horror washed over me. I wasn't sick. I wasn't suffering from early onset dementia, as everyone kept whispering. I was being chemically restrained. Someone in this house, someone I trusted with my life, had been feeding me a cocktail of drugs designed to knock out a 1,200-pound animal, keeping me pliable, confused, and unconscious while winter buried the world outside. I needed to know why. I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling as I reached for the keyboard. I tried to type in my password, Elaine 1958, incorrect password. My heart stopped. They had locked me out and changed the keys to my digital life just like they planned to change the keys to my apartment. I stared at the hint box. It was blank. I closed my eyes and tried to think like Nathan. What would a man who feels entitled to everything use as a password? He wouldn't use my birthday. He wouldn't use his children's names. He would use something that reflected his ego. I typed in empire. Incorrect. I typed in success. Incorrect. Then I remembered what he said when he was accepted to college. I'm going to build a legacy, Mom. I typed in legacy. Access granted. The screen unlocked. A chill went down my spine. I was in. But the relief was instantly replaced by dread. If he had locked me out of my own computer, what was he trying so hard to hide? I logged into my primary checking account, the one connected to my life savings. The balance flashed on the screen, and I felt bile rise in my throat. $182,000. The last time I had checked, back in October before the fog settled in, I had over $340,000. Money I had saved from 40 years of double shifts and missed holidays. I clicked on transaction history, and the screen filled with a cascading list of red numbers. It wasn't just the amounts that made me sick. It was the geography of the theft. ATM withdrawal, Buffalo, NY, $3,000. POS transaction, the Victor Steakhouse, $450. Transfer, Venmo, $2,500. ATM withdrawal, Syracuse, NY, $3,000. They were bleeding me dry, day by day, city by city, 52 separate withdrawals, a total of $158,000 gone. But then I froze. Click, click. The sound of the front door unlocking downstairs echoed through the silent apartment. I stopped breathing. I knew that sound. It was the heavy deadbolt turning, followed by the familiar jingle of keys that only two other people in the world possessed. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under my pillow, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I lay back down, pulling the duvet up to my chin, and squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my breathing to slow, playing the part of the drug-confused old woman they expected to find. Footsteps. Heavy, confident footsteps coming up the stairs. They weren't trying to be quiet. Why would they? In their minds, the animal was sedated. I waited until the front door closed again, 30 minutes later, before I dared to move. Whoever it was had just come in to check on me, to make sure the animal was still asleep, and then left. I pulled the laptop back out, my hands trembling. I didn't go back to the bank account. Instead, I opened my email. I clicked on the sent folder. The horror didn't just wash over me. It gathered momentum like an avalanche. Dozens of emails had been sent from my account over the last 3 months. Emails to my accountant, emails to my lawyer, and mails to the bank. But it was the timestamps that made my blood run cold. 11:42 p.m., 1:15 a.m., 2:30 a.m. They were sent during the hours when I was comatose, knocked out by the blue pills. I clicked on one subject line which showed estate plan update priority. The email was addressed to my family attorney, and it read, "Please prepare the amendments to the trust as discussed. I want to designate Nathan as the sole beneficiary and primary executor, effective immediately." I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. Someone hadn't just stolen my money. They had moved into my digital skin and were living my life while I slept, making decisions, signing documents, and erasing me one email at a time. And then I realized something even worse. I hadn't visited my restaurants in 3 months. Elaine's Table in Rochester, the Bistro in Buffalo, my life's work. If they were draining my bank accounts and rewriting my will, what had they done to the businesses that bore my name? My hands shook violently as I opened my business email, the private server I used exclusively for restaurant operations. I prayed for an empty inbox, and I prayed for silence. Instead, I found a cacophony of digital mismanagement. The inbox was flooded with hundreds of unread messages, vendor contracts approved without my review, staff schedules altered, financial transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, and dozens of sent emails, replies written in my voice, using my signature block and authoring decisions I would never make. Elaine agrees to the vendor's switch. Elaine is stepping back from daily ops. Elaine approves the budget cut. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen my authority. They had put on a puppet show with my life while I lay drooling on a pillow. I needed to talk to someone on the outside, someone loyal. I thought about calling Jane, my manager in Buffalo. But then I looked at my cell phone sitting on the nightstand. If they were monitoring my email, were they monitoring my calls? Was there a tracker on the device? I grabbed the landline, the dusty corded phone in the kitchen that I hadn't used in 5 years. I prayed the service was still active and dialed the back office number for the Buffalo location. It rang 4 times, the sound echoing loudly in the silent apartment. "Bistro, this is Jane," a voice answered, breathless and harried against a backdrop of clattering dishes and shouting cooks. "Jane, I whispered, my voice raspy. It's Elaine. The line went dead silent. The background noise seemed to drop away. Elaine? Her voice cracked. Oh my God, Elaine, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you for 10 weeks. Nathan said he said you were in a facility. A facility? He said the surgery caused a stroke, that you couldn't speak, and that we weren't allowed to visit because it would upset you. The lie was so complete and so devastatingly simple that I almost laughed. They hadn't just drugged me, they had killed me off socially. To my staff, to my friends, and to my world, Elaine Porter was already gone. I didn't have a stroke, Jane, I said, gripping the cord until my knuckles turned white. I'm at home, and I need to come see you today, but you cannot tell Nathan I called. Do not put this in the log, and do not tell the staff. He's been all over here, Elaine, Jane whispered, her voice trembling. He comes in twice a week. He has fired Marco and Sarah, and he's changing the suppliers. He's tearing it apart. I know, I said. I'm coming to fix it. I hung up the phone and slumped against the kitchen counter. To understand how I let this happen, how a woman who built $1 million business from scraps could be tricked into signing her own death warrant, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to the hospital. 3 months ago, winter arrived early in Rochester. I slipped on a patch of black ice outside the restaurant loading dock. I remember the sky spinning, the sickening crack of bone against pavement, and then a world of white pain before the darkness took me. I woke up in a recovery room at Strong Memorial Hospital, drowning in a haze of anesthesia and Dilaudid. My hip had been shattered and reconstructed with titanium screws. The pain was a living thing, a red-hot wire running from my waist to my knee. But through the fog, I felt a hand holding mine. Mom, I'm here. You're okay. I forced my heavy eyelids open. Nathan was sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair by the bed, his face pale and drawn, and his eyes red-rimmed. He looked terrified. You scared us, Mom, he choked out, bringing my hand to his cheek. God, you really scared us. I thought we lost you. I had never seen my son cry like that. Not since he was a little boy scraping his knee on the playground. He was 40 years old, a grown man who usually called me once a month out of obligation. But in that moment, he was just a scared boy who needed his mother. Or so I thought. Brooke was there too, hovering on the other side of the bed, dabbing her eyes with the tissue. We love you so much, Elaine, she whispered, smoothing the hair back from my sweaty forehead. We're going to take care of everything. You don't have to worry about the business. You don't have to worry about the bills. Just heal. For a woman who had spent 40 years carrying the weight of the world on her own shoulders, raising a son alone, building a business alone, and fighting every battle alone, those words were a sedative stronger than anything in the IV drip. We've got you, Nathan promised, and I let myself believe him. Nathan stayed by my side for 4 days. He slept in that chair, held the straw for me to drink, and adjusted my pillows. He was the perfect son. The nurses cooed over him. You're so lucky, the night nurse told me. Most kids just visit for an hour, but he hasn't left your side. What I didn't know then was that it wasn't devotion. It was something darker. On the 4th day, the trap was sprung. I was groggy, floating on a fresh dose of pain meds, when Nathan opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Mom, I hate to bother you with this, he said, his voice thick with apology, but the insurance company is being a nightmare. They need authorization for the rehab facility, and the hospital needs consent for Brooke and me to pick up your prescriptions. He placed a pen in my weak hand. It's just standard HIPAA forms and insurance proxies, he explained, flipping to the signature lines. Just sign here, and here, and here. We'll handle the red tape so you can sleep. The words on the page were swimming. I tried to focus, but the letters danced like insects. Power of attorney, durable financial proxy, asset management, and so on. A warning bell rang deep in my lizard brain. Read it, Elaine. Read every word. But then I looked at Nathan, my son, the boy I had bought a bike for when we couldn't afford rent, and the boy who had slept in a chair for 4 nights to watch over me. How could I doubt him? How could I be so cynical as to think my own child was tricking me while I lay broken in a hospital bed? So I silenced the voice and trusted him. And I signed my name. I signed it on the first page, the second page, up to the 10th page. And with every stroke of the pen, I had no idea that I wasn't signing insurance forms. I was signing away my freedom, my fortune, and my future. A week later, they brought me home. But as they wheeled me into my apartment in downtown Rochester, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt sterile. They had rearranged the furniture for my safety, creating wide, empty paths that made the cozy living room feel like a hospital corridor. They had installed grab bars in the bathroom and a high-tech hospital bed in my bedroom, replacing my comfortable antique 4-poster. But it was the blink of the little red lights that caught my eye. There was a camera mounted in the corner of the living room, another in the hallway, and another facing my bed. "What are those?" I asked, pointing a trembling finger. "Baby monitors," Brooke said cheerfully, unpacking my suitcase. "High-definition ones. They connect to our phones. That way, if you fall or need help when we aren't here, we'll know instantly. We can talk to you through them." "I don't want cameras watching me sleep," I said, trying to sit up. "It's just for recovery, Mom," Nathan had said, his voice firm. "The doctor insisted. You're at a fall risk now. If you fall and we don't know, you could die. Do you want to die alone on the floor?" The way he said it, "die alone," sent a shiver down my spine. It didn't sound like a worry. It sounded like a threat. "We took care of everything," Brooke said, smiling that bright plastic smile. "You don't have to lift a finger." At that time, I didn't realize then exactly what taking care of everything meant. Not too long after, everything became clear to me. That first night was the beginning of the long sleep. Nathan came into the bedroom at 8 p.m. He was holding a small paper cup and a glass of water. "Time for your meds," he said gently. There was the white oxycodone for the hip pain, and then there were 2 large, oblong blue pills. "What are those?" I asked. "I don't recognize them." "Muscle relaxers," he lied without blinking. "Dr. Evans added them to your chart. They stop the spasms so the bone can knit. Trust me, Mom, you need these." Trust, that word again, the weapon he used to bludgeon my instincts. I swallowed them. It didn't hit me like a sleeping pill. It hit me like a sledgehammer. Within 20 minutes, the room didn't just blur, it tilted. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. A heavy, suffocating blanket of gray static seemed to descend over my brain. I tried to lift my hand to scratch my nose, but my arm wouldn't move. It felt like dead weight, pinned to the mattress. I tried to speak. I tried to say, "Nathan, something is wrong." But all that came out was a low, guttural moan. I saw Nathan standing at the foot of the bed. He wasn't rushing to help me. He wasn't calling 911. He was just watching me and checking his watch. "There she goes," he said softly. Not to me, to someone in the hallway. Brooke stepped into the doorway. She looked at my paralyzed body, my eyes rolling back in my head, and she didn't look concerned. Instead, she looked satisfied. "Is she out?" Brooke asked. "She's gone," Nathan said. "Get the laptop. We have work to do." That was the last thing I heard before the blackness swallowed me whole. And for the next 3 months, I existed only in fragments, waking up thirsty, being force-fed another blue pill, and sinking back into the dark. While I slept, they dismantled my life. But now I was awake. The pills were in the sink. The fog was lifting. And I was about to find out exactly what work they had been doing on my laptop. I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching the evidence of my own poisoning, when I heard the heavy thud of boots on the stairs. It was morning, or what passed for morning in the gray winter light of Rochester. I quickly shoved the pill bottles under my pillow and tried to compose my face. I needed to look confused, like the helpless invalid they thought they had created. The bedroom door swung open without a knock. Brooke breezed in, bringing with her a gust of cold air and the smell of expensive perfume. She was holding a small silver tray with a glass of orange juice and a paper cup containing my morning medication. "Good morning, Mom," she chirped, her voice thick with that condescending sweetness she reserved for children and pets. "It's time for your vitamins. You slept so late today." Nathan was worried. She set the tray on the nightstand and picked up the paper cup. Inside were 2 blue pills, xylazine, the horse tranquilizer. She held the cup out to me, smiling that bright plastic smile. "Here we go," she coaxed. "Down the hatch. You'll feel so much better." I looked at the pills. Then I looked at her. For 3 months, I had swallowed these without question. For 3 months, I had thanked her for poisoning me. But today, the fog was gone. "I don't think so, Brooke," I said. My voice was raspy from disuse, but it was steady. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated, pushing her hand away. "I looked them up. Pleva 434, xylazine, acepromazine. Those aren't vitamins, and they aren't muscle relaxers. They are veterinary sedatives used for surgery on livestock." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. I watched her face, waiting for the denial and for the shock. But there was no shock. Brooke didn't gasp. She didn't stammer. She didn't try to explain. Instead, her face went completely blank. The warmth drained out of her expression like water from a tub, leaving behind something cold, hard, and terrifyingly bored. She set the cup down on the nightstand with a deliberate click. "Well," she sighed, checking her manicured nails, annoyed rather than afraid. "The FedEx shipment was delayed by the blizzard. I told Nathan we should have stocked up. You were supposed to be out cold until at least noon." The casualness of it hit me harder than a scream. She wasn't even afraid of being caught. She was just annoyed that her dosage calculation was off. "You're poisoning me," I whispered, my hand reaching for my phone on the bedspread. "I'm calling the police." Brooke moved faster than I thought possible. She didn't grab the phone. She just leaned over me, her hands planting firmly on the mattress on either side of my legs, trapping me. Then she loomed over me, her face inches from mine. "Go ahead," she whispered, her breath smelling of mint and malice. "Call them. Dial 911 right now." I hesitated, her confidence rattling me. "Do you know what happens when you make that call, Elaine?" She asked softly. "The police will show up, and they will find a 66-year-old woman with a documented history of post-operative psychosis. They will find a woman who has been confused and aggressive for months. And standing right next to her are her loving son and daughter-in-law, who have power of attorney and a stack of medical records signed by your own doctor stating you are mentally incompetent." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her own phone. She hovered her thumb over the screen. "You have 2 choices," she said. "Option A, you take the pills, go back to sleep, and we keep playing happy family. Option B, I call 911 myself. I tell them you've become violent and you're threatening self-harm. They won't take you to jail, Elaine. They'll take you to the psychiatric ward at Strong Memorial on a 72-hour involuntary hold. And once you're in the system, you never come out." She smiled again, but this time it was a predator's smile. "So, what's it going to be? The nap or the straitjacket?" I looked at the phone in her hand, looked at the pills, and realized with a sick feeling that she wasn't bluffing. She had built a cage of lies around me so thick that the truth couldn't get out. "Get out," I choked out. "Suit yourself," she said, straightening up and smoothing her sweater. "I'll leave them here. You'll take them when the withdrawal kicks in. You always do." And she walked out, leaving the door open. I didn't take the pills. I flushed them down the toilet. But as I sat on the bathroom floor, watching the blue swirling water, I realized that surviving the drugs was the easy part. Surviving the legal trap they had set for me was going to be the fight of my life. I waited until I heard Brooke's car leave the driveway before I dared to open my laptop again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I needed to know the extent of the damage. I had seen the bank withdrawals. Now I needed to see the legal damage. I logged into my email and typed transfer into the search bar. A single result popped up. It was an email sent from my account to our family attorney, Mr. Henderson. Subject, property transfer authorization, Elaine's table. Date, December 12th. Time, 9:35 p.m. I stared at the date, December 12th. My birthday. The memory of that night washed over me, sickeningly vivid. I remembered sitting in the living room, propped up in the recliner because my hip was hurting. Nathan had cooked dinner. Brooke had baked a cake. Chocolate with raspberry filling, my favorite, and my grandchildren, Ava and Leo, had been there, running around with handmade cards. I remembered Nathan kneeling beside my chair, holding my hand, with tears in his eyes. "We love you so much, Mom," he had said. "We just want you to relax. You've worked so hard. Let us take the burden for a while." I remembered feeling so grateful and so loved. I remembered taking the pain medication Brooke had given me with the cake, and I remembered passing out before the kids even opened the gifts. Now, looking at the screen, I realized the truth. At 9:35 p.m., while I was unconscious in the recliner, drooling on myself with a half-eaten piece of birthday cake on my lap, Nathan had walked into my bedroom, opened my laptop, and logged into my email. And he had sent this message. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I have decided to retire effective immediately. Please process the deed transfer for both the Rochester and Buffalo properties to my son, Nathan Porter. He has my full authorization to take over ownership." Attached to the email was a PD. I opened it. It was a scanned copy of the deed transfer. At the bottom, in shaky, jagged ink, was my signature. It was a copy-paste job. He had scanned my signature from an old tax return and slapped it onto the document. I put a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. He hadn't just stolen my business. He had done it on my birthday. He had used my grandchildren as props, used the cake as a distraction, and used his own mother's love as a cover to rob her blind. Legally, I didn't own Elaine's table anymore. My son now did. And if the guardianship petition went through in 6 days, he wouldn't just own the business. He would also own me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Nathan. "Dinner tonight. Victor Steakhouse, 7 p.m. We need to celebrate your recovery, Mom. Love you." I knew it was a trap. You don't take the animal you're fattening for the slaughter out to a steakhouse unless you plan to finish the job. I called Margaret Richardson, the elder law attorney Jane had recommended. She answered on the first ring. "Do not go," she warned. "He's going to try to get you to sign something, or he's going to stage a scene to prove you're incompetent." "I have to go," I said, my voice cold. "If I don't, he'll come here, and I need to get out of this apartment. I need to be in public." "Then record everything," Margaret said. "Put your phone in your pocket and turn on the voice memo app. If he threatens you, we need it on tape." Nathan picked me up at 6:30. The drive to the Victor Steakhouse, an upscale, dimly lit institution in the suburbs of Rochester, was suffocatingly silent. Snow piled up on the roadside, dirty and gray, mirroring the mood in the car. Inside, the restaurant was packed. The smell of searing meat and expensive red wine filled the air. The clatter of silverware and the hum of conversation should have been comforting, but tonight it felt overwhelming. Nathan requested a booth in the back corner. "Ideally quiet," he had told the hostess. "My mother is sensitive to noise." Isolation, even in a crowd. We hadn't even ordered appetizers when he pulled the folder out. It wasn't a menu. It was a glossy brochure for the Meadows, a secure memory care facility in Syracuse. "Brooke and I did some touring," he said, sliding the brochure across the white tablecloth. "We think this is the best place for you, Mom. They have 24-hour monitoring, and you won't be confused there." He placed a document on top of the brochure titled Admission Agreement. "Sign it," he said. His voice wasn't gentle anymore. It was flat. There's a bed opening up tomorrow. If we don't take it, you go to the bottom of the list. I looked at the paper. Buried in the fine print was a clause. Resident grants full financial and medical authority to designated family member. I'm not signing that, I said, placing my hands on the table to stop them from shaking. Nathan's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. He squeezed hard, his thumb digging into my pulse point. Under the table, unseen by the rest of the restaurant, he was hurting me. You're going to sign it, he hissed, leaning in, a rictus of a smile plastered on his face for the benefit of the waiter approaching with water. Because if you don't, I'll call the police right now, and we'll tell them you're wandering, and that you are hallucinating. And instead of a nice private room at the Meadows, you will spend tonight in a holding cell at the psychiatric ward. The waiter poured the water, oblivious. Nathan didn't let go of my wrist. I felt the walls closing in. The heat of the restaurant, the noise, and the pressure on my arm. I couldn't breathe. I need to use the restroom, I gasped. Sit down, he commanded. Nathan, if you don't let me go to the bathroom, I'm going to scream, I whispered. I will scream so loud that every single person in this restaurant will look at us. Do you want that scene? He assessed me, saw the desperation in my eyes, and released my wrist. 2 minutes, he warned. I walked to the bathroom on shaking legs. I didn't go into a stall. I went straight to the exit door in the back hallway, the one marked for staff. I pushed through the heavy steel exit door and stumbled out into the freezing Rochester night. The cold air hit my lungs like broken glass. I ran toward the taxi stand, slipping on the black ice in my heels. Mom! The shout came from the side door. Nathan burst out, his face twisted in rage, no longer bothering to hide the monster beneath the suit. He was 20 feet away and closing fast. Get back here, he screamed, lunging for me. A yellow cab was idling at the curb, a couple just stepping out. I didn't wait. I shoved past them and threw myself into the back seat, locking the door just as Nathan's fist slammed against the window. Drive! I screamed at the terrified driver. Just drive! As the cab peeled away, I looked back. Nathan was standing in the snow, panting, and pulling his phone out of his pocket. He wasn't calling me. He was calling the police to execute the trap. I didn't sleep that night. I pushed the heavy oak dresser in front of my bedroom door and sat with my back against the wall, clutching my phone like a weapon. Margaret Richardson had told me to go to a hotel, but I was stubborn. This was my home. I had paid the mortgage for 30 years, and I wasn't going to let him chase me out of my own sanctuary. That was my mistake. I forgot that to a predator, a sanctuary is just a trap with fewer exits. The knock came at 9 a.m. It wasn't the polite tap of a neighbor. It was the heavy, authoritative pounding of the law. I moved the dresser aside, my muscles screaming in protest, and opened the door. 2 uniformed Rochester police officers stood in the hallway, snow melting off their boots onto my carpet. And standing behind them, wearing a mask of perfectly calibrated concern, was Nathan. Mrs. Porter? The taller officer asked, his hand resting casually near his belt. We received a call requesting a wellness check. Your son is concerned you might be a danger to yourself. The words hit me like a slap. A danger to myself. That was the legal phrase. The magic words that stripped away your rights. I'm fine, I said, my voice rising in panic. My son is lying. He's stealing from me. He's the danger, not me. I pointed a shaking finger at Nathan. He didn't argue. He didn't shout back. He just looked at the officers with sad, resigned eyes and sighed. See? Nathan whispered to them, just loud enough for me to hear. She's paranoid, thinks everyone is stealing from her, and hasn't slept in days. Look at the furniture barricading the door. The officers looked past me into the bedroom. They saw the dresser pushed out of place, saw the disheveled bed, and saw a frantic, unkempt old woman screaming accusations. Then they looked at Nathan, calm, well-dressed, and holding a folder of medical records that I knew were fake. Ma'am, the officer said, stepping into the apartment without asking. We need you to come with us to Strong Memorial for an evaluation, just to be safe. No, I backed away, backing into the kitchen counter. I have a lawyer. Her name is Margaret Richardson. Call her. She knows everything. We can call her from the hospital, the officer said, closing the distance. Please don't make this difficult. I looked at Nathan. A small, triumphant smile touched the corners of his mouth. He had won. He knew that the more I fought, the crazier I looked. He had weaponized my own fear against me. I'm not going. I grabbed the countertop. The officer grabbed my arm, not gently. Mrs. Porter, under New York State mental hygiene law, we are taking you into protective custody. You can walk or we can carry you. I walked. I walked out of my home in my slippers, flanked by police, while my neighbors watched from their cracked doors. And as they guided me into the back of the cruiser, Nathan leaned in, supposedly to give me a goodbye hug. His lips brushed my ear. I told you, he whispered, his voice cold as the ice on the sidewalk. By the time you get out, if you get out, there will be nothing left to fight for. He slammed the car door, and I watched him disappear through the rear window, standing in the driveway of the house he had already stolen. The intake room at the psychiatric unit smelled of industrial bleach and stale despair. It is a systematic process designed to strip you of your humanity, layer by layer. First, they took my purse, then my phone, my only link to Margaret and my only link to the evidence. I watched them drop it into a clear plastic bag and seal it with a zip tie. For your safety, the nurse said robotically. Then came the clothes, my belt, my bra, and the shoelaces from my sneakers. Anything I could use to hurt myself, they said. But as I stood there in a thin, open-backed hospital gown, shivering under the fluorescent lights, I knew the real reason. Without your clothes, you aren't a person. You're a patient. You're a number. A doctor came in, a young resident who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He held a clipboard that contained the lies Nathan had fed him. Mrs. Porter, he said, not making eye contact. Your son reports a history of post-operative psychosis, paranoia, and refusal of medication. You barricaded your door? Because he is trying to kill me, I said clearly. He has been drugging me with xylazine. Test my blood. Please, just test my blood. The doctor stopped writing. He looked at me, then at the file. Patient exhibits persecutory delusions involving family members, he muttered as he wrote. It didn't matter what I said. The truth sounded like madness because the lie was written on official stationery. I'm admitting you on a 72-hour involuntary hold, he said, snapping the folder shut. We'll start you on an antipsychotic and a sedative to help you rest. I don't want pills, I begged. You can take them orally, the nurse said, stepping forward with a small paper cup, or we can administer them intramuscularly. It's your choice. It wasn't a choice. It was a threat. I swallowed the pills. And for the second time in 3 months, I felt the world dissolve into a soft, gray fog. But this time, I wasn't in my bed. I was in a locked room with shatterproof glass, listening to the screams of a stranger down the hall. Time operates differently in a psychiatric ward. There are no clocks, only the rhythm of the medication cart. Medications, lunch, medications, dinner, then sleep. I floated through the first 24 hours in a chemical haze. I knew I needed to fight, but my brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton. I sat in the day room, staring at the television without seeing it, and trying desperately to remember the name of my lawyer. Margaret something. On the second day, Nathan came. He brought daisies, cheap supermarket daisies wrapped in crinkly plastic. The nurses smiled at him as he buzzed through the double security doors. Such a good son, I heard one whisper. He pulled a chair up to my knees in the day room. He didn't look crazy or dangerous. He looked sad and tired. Hi, Mom, he said softly. Get away from me, I slurred, the sedatives making my tongue heavy. He leaned in close, the smell of his aftershave cutting through the scent of bleach. I have good news, he whispered. I found a buyer for the Rochester location. They're going to gut it and turn it into a sports bar. And the cash offer is good too. It'll pay for your stay here for, at least 2 years. My heart hammered against my ribs. You can't sell it, I whispered. It's mine. Not anymore, he smiled. I have the power of attorney, I have the deed transfer, and now I have the medical diagnosis to prove you're incompetent to object. By the time you get out, the ink will be dry. He patted my hand. It's over, Mom. Just let go. Stop fighting. It's so much easier if you just disappear. He stood up, loud enough for the staff to hear. I love you, Mom. I'll be back tomorrow. I watched him walk out, the heavy magnetic locks clicking shut behind him. I sat there and felt something break inside me. Not my mind, my heart. I had spent my life building a legacy for him, and he was liquidating it to pay for my imprisonment. I went back to my room and curled into a ball on the plastic-covered mattress, sobbing quietly. I was done. He had won. He's feeding off it, you know. The voice came from the other bed. My roommate was a woman named Martha. She was 70, with wild gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. For 2 days, she had done nothing but rock back and forth and hum hymns. I thought she was catatonic. But now, she was looking at me with a clarity that was terrifying. Who? I sniffled. Your son, Martha said. She sat up, her voice raspy but sharp. I watched him. He didn't come here to visit you. He came here to drink your pain. It makes him feel powerful. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. My daughter put me in here 4 years ago, Martha said matter-of-factly. She took the house, took the pension. I cried every time she visited. I begged and asked her why she hated me so much. Martha leaned forward. That's what they want. They want to know that they still have the power to break you. As long as you cry, they know you still love them, and if you still love them, they win. It hit me then. Nathan wasn't afraid of my lawyers or of the police. He was afraid of my indifference. So what do? I asked. You stop being his mother, Martha said fiercely. You kill the part of you that loves him. You become a stone. When he comes back, don't cry, don't beg, and don't yell. You look at him like he's a stranger. She lay back down and pulled the sheet up. That is the only way you get out of here, Elaine. You have to care more about your revenge than you do about your son. I lay awake for a long time, listening to Martha's breathing. She was right. I had been fighting Nathan like a mother scolding a naughty child. I needed to fight him like a stranger who had broken into my house. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness of the psychiatric ward, I felt the last lingering warmth of motherly love freeze over into something hard, cold, and useful. I was ready for Dr. Hayes. Day 3 began like the others, with the rattle of the medication cart. But this time, when the nurse entered with the paper cup, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I remembered Martha's words, become a stone. I took the cup, pretended to swallow, and hid the pill in my cheek until she left. Then I spat the chemical restraint into the tissue I had hidden in my sleeve. 2 hours later, the heavy magnetic doors buzzed open. It wasn't Nathan. It was Jane. And she wasn't alone. She was flanked by a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a leather briefcase, Margaret Richardson. Jane looked out of place in the sterile ward, smelling of vanilla and fresh rain, and holding a manila folder like a shield when she saw me. Gaunt, hair unwashed, and wearing a hospital gown, her face crumbled. Elaine, she choked out, rushing to the bed. Margaret stepped in front of the nurse who tried to intervene. I am Margaret Richardson, attorney at law. I have a court order signed by Judge Walters demanding an immediate independent psychiatric evaluation for Mrs. Porter. If you interfere, I will have you deposed for aiding and abetting an unlawful imprisonment. The nurse backed away. Jane sat on the edge of the bed and opened the folder. We found it, she whispered. We found the second set of books. She spread out the evidence on the hospital blanket. It wasn't just the bank transfers. It was the inventory logs, the vendor kickbacks. He wasn't just stealing cash, Elaine, Jane said, her voice trembling with anger. He was dismantling the supply chain. He fired our local farmers, switched us to a frozen food distributor owned by his college roommate, and he's been taking a 15% kickback on every order. Rage is a powerful stimulant. It cleared the last of the fog from my brain. An hour later, Dr. Patricia Hayes arrived. She was the court-appointed independent evaluator, a woman Nathan couldn't bribe and Brooke couldn't charm. Mrs. Porter, she said, sitting down and clicking her pen. I've read your file. It says you are confused, paranoid, and unable to manage your affairs. Is that true? I sat up straight and looked her in the eye. Dr. Hayes, my gross profit margin last quarter was 22%. My labor costs were running at 28%. My son, who has zero restaurant experience, switched our butter supplier to an oil blend to save 4 cents a unit, unaware that it would ruin the texture of our signature pastry. I leaned forward. I am not confused. I am furious. And if you test my blood right now, you won't find dementia. You will find traces of a veterinary sedative that my daughter-in-law has been slipping into my morning juice. Dr. Hayes stopped writing. She looked at me, really looked at me for a long moment. Nurse, she called out, not looking away from me. Bring a phlebotomy kit. We need a toxicology screen, stat. The toxicology report came back clean of antipsychotics, but positive for xylazine residue. The judge signed the release order immediately. I walked out of Strong Memorial Hospital on a Tuesday evening. I didn't go home. I told Jane to drive me straight to Elaine's table in Rochester. I needed to see the body of the crime. We pulled up at 7 p.m., prime dinner rush, but the parking lot, usually packed with cars, was half empty. I walked in. The first thing I noticed was the smell. For 20 years, my restaurant had smelled of fresh garlic, roasting herbs, and yeasty dough. Now it smelled of stale fryer grease and floor cleaner. The hostess stand was unmanned. I walked into the dining room. There were maybe 6 tables occupied. The tablecloths, usually crisp white linen, were gone, replaced by cheap paper mats. The fresh flowers on the tables, my signature touch, were gone. I walked into the kitchen. Tony, my head chef, was standing at the pass, looking defeated. He was plating a dish that looked gray and lifeless. Tony, I said. He dropped the ladle. Elaine? Oh my God, you're out? What is this? I asked, pointing to a box of frozen vegetables sitting on the counter. Since when do we serve frozen carrots? Since your son fired the produce guy, Tony spat, slamming a pan into the sink. He said fresh was inefficient. He cut the kitchen staff by half. Elaine, he's killing us. The regulars come in, they taste the food, and they don't come back. I walked through my kitchen, the kitchen I had scrubbed with a toothbrush, the kitchen where I had taught Nathan to chop onions, and I saw the rot. Dust on the vents, a flickering light bulb that hadn't been changed, morale so low it felt heavy in the air. Nathan hadn't just stolen the money. He had murdered the soul of the place. He had looked at my life's work, my art, and seen only an ATM machine to be smashed open. That was the moment the last trace of maternal guilt evaporated. I turned to Margaret, who was standing by the door. Set up the mediation, I said, my voice cold. I want to look him in the eye. We met 3 days later in a sterile conference room at a downtown law firm. It was supposed to be a settlement negotiation. Margaret had set the bait perfectly. She told Nathan's lawyers that I was broken and willing to settle to avoid a public trial. She hinted that if he apologized, I might not press charges. It was a lie. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted a confession on the record. Nathan walked in wearing a suit I recognized, an Italian silk blend that cost $3,000. He had bought it with the corporate credit card 2 weeks ago. He sat down across from me. He didn't look sorry. He looked annoyed that he had to be there. The mediator, a retired judge, cleared his throat. Mrs. Porter has requested this meeting to understand the motivations behind the events. If we can reach an understanding here, we may avoid criminal court. Nathan smirked. He looked at me, seeing the frail old woman he thought he had crushed. He didn't see the wolf waiting behind my eyes. I want to know why, I said softly, keeping my hands folded to hide the shaking. I gave you everything, Nathan. The bike, the camp, the tuition. Why did you try to destroy me? Nathan's lawyer touched his arm to silence him, but Nathan shook him off. His ego was too big for the room. You didn't give me everything, he sneered, leaning forward. You gave me guilt. You gave me the burden of your sacrifice. Every birthday, every holiday, I had to hear about how hard you worked, how much you suffered for me. So you stole my retirement? I asked. I took my inheritance early, he corrected, his voice dripping with entitlement. You were just sitting on it, Mom, hoarding it. You're an old woman running a business you don't understand anymore. I was optimizing it and making it efficient. By poisoning me? I asked. By locking me in a psychiatric ward? The room went silent. Margaret was taking notes furiously. The mediator looked uncomfortable. Nathan laughed. A short, sharp bark of a laugh. I didn't poison you. I managed you. You were in the way and wouldn't let go, so I made you let go. He leaned back, crossing his legs. And honestly, it was easy. That's the sad part. You trusted me so much it was pathetic. I handed you pills and you swallowed them. I handed you papers and you signed them. You made yourself a victim, Mom. I just exploited the opportunity. He looked around the room, feeling triumphant. So let's stop the drama. I'll give you back the apartment. I keep the business. I put you on a stipend, and you drop the restraining order. Deal? I stared at him, at the son I had held in my arms, the son I had protected from his father's fists, and I realized that the cycle of abuse hadn't ended with my divorce. It had just changed faces. I stood up slowly. No deal, I said. Nathan looked confused. What? I didn't come here to negotiate, Nathan, I said, my voice gathering strength until it filled the room. I came here to let you dig your own grave. I pointed to the corner of the room where a small red light was blinking on the court reporter's steno machine. This is a recorded deposition, Nathan. You just confessed to elder abuse, fraud, and premeditated assault on the official record. The color drained from his face, and his lawyer slammed his folder shut, swearing under his breath. We're done here, the lawyer hissed, grabbing Nathan's arm. Yes, I said, watching my son's arrogance crumble into terror. We are. As they rushed out of the room, Margaret smiled at me. I'll call the district attorney, she said. With that transcript, they won't just charge him. They'll bury him. The trap was sprung on a Friday morning, 3 days after the mediation. Margaret Richardson had coordinated everything with the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. We knew Nathan was desperate. We knew that with the restraining order pending and the accounts frozen, he would try one last cash grab before running. We were counting on his greed, and he didn't disappoint. At 9:30 a.m., I sat in the back of an unmarked police sedan across the street from Elaine's table in Rochester. The heater was humming against the bitter upstate chill. Detective Miller sat in the front seat, sipping coffee and watching the entrance. He's late, Miller muttered. He'll come, I said, my eyes fixed on the door of the business I built. He thinks I'm at the lawyer's office signing the settlement. He thinks the restaurant is empty. At 9:42 a.m., Nathan's black BMW pulled into the back alley. I watched my son get out. He looked frantic. He wasn't wearing the Italian suit today. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, glancing over his shoulder like a common thief. He used his key to open the delivery door, unaware that I had changed the system to a silent alarm. There was no siren to warn him, just an immediate digital alert sent directly to Detective Miller's dashboard. Inside, on the silent security feed I was watching on Detective Miller's tablet, I saw him run straight to the manager's office. He fell to his knees, ripping up the carpet to get to the floor safe. He didn't have the combination anymore, so he had brought a crowbar. I watched my son, the finance genius, sweating and cursing, trying to pry open a steel safe like a common burglar because he was too broke to buy gas. "That's him," I whispered. "Showtime," Miller said into his radio. We watched as 2 patrol cars swooped into the alley, blocking the BMW. 2 more units pulled up to the front. I didn't look away. I forced myself to watch. Moments later, the back door flew open. Nathan stumbled out, pushed forward by 2 officers. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He was shouting, red-faced, and thrashing against the grip of the law. As they marched him toward the cruiser, he looked up. He looked right at the unmarked car across the street. He couldn't see me through the tinted glass, but he knew. I saw the realization hit him. The realization that the weak, senile old woman had just outmaneuvered him. Detective Miller turned to me. "You want to go say hello?" I looked at the son who had poisoned me, the man who had laughed about my death in a mediation room. "No," I said, leaning back in the seat. "I have nothing left to say to him. Just take him away." While Nathan was being booked in downtown Rochester, a second team was pulling up to the expansive colonial house in the suburbs, the house they had been renovating with my stolen retirement fund. Brooke was hosting a brunch. Neighbors later told me the scene was straight out of a movie. Police cruisers swarming the quiet cul-de-sac. Officers in tactical gear walking up the manicured path. They found Brooke in the kitchen, pouring mimosas. They didn't just arrest her for fraud. They arrested her for assault with a deadly weapon and illegal possession of a controlled substance. The forensic investigation of her laptop had uncovered the smoking gun, a digital paper trail leading to an illegal online pharmacy based overseas. She hadn't just bought the xylazine, she had researched the lethal dosages and had Googled symptoms of dementia versus overdose and how long does xylazine stay in the blood. She wasn't a supportive wife following her husband's lead. She was the architect of the chemical cage they had put me in. They let her out in handcuffs, past her terrified friends, and past the luxury SUV she bought with my credit card. The reign of the Porter family was over. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. The trial took place 6 months later. It was a spectacle. The local news called it the Steakhouse Sting. I sat in the front row every single day, wore my best suit, and kept my head high. The defense tried to paint me as confused, claiming I had consented to the care and then forgotten. But they couldn't explain the toxicology report. They couldn't explain the forged signatures on the deed transfers dated on my birthday. And they certainly couldn't explain the recording from the mediation room. When the prosecutor played that tape of Nathan's voice sneering, "I didn't poison you, I managed you," the jury looked at him with pure disgust. It took them less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty. On all counts. Grand larceny, wire fraud, forgery, elderly abuse, and assault. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen enough greedy children to last a lifetime, did not hold back during the sentencing. "Mr. and Mrs. Porter," she said, looking over her glasses, "you took a woman who gave you everything and treated her like livestock. You stripped her of her dignity, her agency, and her health, all for the sake of greed. This was not a lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, slow-motion execution of a living soul." She sentenced Nathan to 8 years in state prison and Brooke to 6 years. They were ordered to pay full restitution, though I knew the money was mostly gone, spent on vacations and cars that were now being auctioned off by the state. As the bailiffs led them away, Nathan finally looked at me. His eyes were wide and terrified. He looked like a child who had realized the game had gone too far. He mouthed the word "Mom," but I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger in a jumpsuit. I turned my back and walked out of the courtroom into the bright spring sunshine. Rebuilding a life isn't like fixing a leak. It's more like growing a garden after a fire. You have to clear the ash before you can plant anything new. I went back to work the Monday after the verdict. The first thing I did was close Elaine's table for 2 weeks. I hired a cleaning crew to scrub every inch of the kitchen, washing away the grease and the neglect. I threw out the frozen food and called my old suppliers, the local farmers Nathan had fired, and asked them to come back. I'm sorry, I told them. I was away, but I'm back now. And they came back. Because loyalty, unlike greed, has deep roots. When we reopened, the smell of stale fryer oil was gone, replaced by the scent of roasting garlic, fresh yeast, and simmering tomato sauce. The regulars returned, hesitant at first, then relieved. I stood at the pass, expediting orders, my hip aching from the long hours and feeling the heat of the ovens on my face. It was exhausting. It was hard. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. My grandchildren, Ava and Leo, visit me now under the supervision of their other grandmother. It's hard. They ask when Mommy and Daddy are coming home. I tell them the truth, that action's consequences, and that their parents are in a timeout for grown-ups. As I smooth their hair and give them the chocolate chip cookies their mother never learned to bake. I love them, but I will never let them or anyone have the power to destroy me again. I keep my accounts locked. I keep my will updated, and I keep my eyes open. On the 1-year anniversary of the day I woke up from the fog, I stood on the balcony of my apartment. I had transformed the space. Where Nathan had installed cameras to watch me, I had hung paintings. Where Brooke had put safety rails, I had put bookshelves. And on the balcony, I had planted a garden. Basil, rosemary, thyme, hardy herbs that can survive a freeze and come back stronger in the spring. I watered them as the sun set over the Rochester skyline, the sky turning a bruised purple. I thought about Nathan, sitting in a cell, probably blaming me for his fate. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who equated sacrifice with love. She was gone. That woman was gone, and I didn't miss her at all. I went inside and made dinner for one. A simple pasta with fresh basil from my garden and a glass of good red wine. I sat at my table in the quiet of my own home with no one to take care of, no one to worry about, and no one to fear. Some people call this loneliness. They look at a woman eating alone and they see a tragedy. But as I took a sip of wine and watched the city lights flicker on, I knew the truth. This wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. It was the freedom of knowing that the only person responsible for my happiness and my safety was me. And for the first time in 66 years, I was in excellent hands. You've made it to the end. You walked through the fire with Elaine. But I have to be honest, it breaks my heart when I see people listen to these stories, feel these heavy emotions, and then just walk away. No subscription, no support, just silence. It feels like I'm pouring my soul into a void, working days and nights to bring these voices to life, only to be met with ghost viewers. Please, don't be another ghost. If this story kept you company, don't just take it and leave. You owe it to the story to leave a mark. A subscribe, a super thanks, or even just comment in your city. Tell me where in the world you are listening from. Let me know exactly where my voice is traveling so I know I'm not alone in this. And if you aren't ready to leave yet, don't. There are 2 more real-life journeys right here on your screen. Pick one. Stay with me a little longer. Don't let the silence win. Until next time.